Good evening. Welcome to the first distinguished speaker lecture of the series for the fall. Really honored to introduce David Kassan, who's going to be speaking to you shortly. He's been on campus teaching 2 weeks of portrait painting for the MFA students, which has been amazing. And it made me think about something that I thought was really valuable is oftentimes we come to an art school and we learn how to paint. And sometimes we even think about what to paint. But David is really investigating who and why to paint. And I think that very shortly you'll see that there's a deep humanistic message in his work. As technically remarkable as he is, I think his painting is a tool to explore something more profound, more meaningful than showing off. So it's really been great to work with you, and I think the students have immensely enjoyed it, and everyone's here to hear David. So, and this microphone is really just for the recording, and there will be a quick Q&A afterwards too.
I guess really just a quick background. My name is David Kassan. I'm a painter. I've been a painter for about 20 years now. Got represented by a gallery in New York City about almost 20 years ago, right when I moved to New York City, luckily. I used to do cityscapes around New York City to kind of get to know the area that I lived in as a way of figuring out things, just kind of understanding my place where I was and all of that. And then I slowly transitioned after 9/11 to being a figurative painter, I guess. Started taking classes at the Art Students League in New York for about 6 years or 7 years, just on and off, painting morning and night and afternoon every single day, working from life. Really taking my time with the paintings. We were talking in class about, we did 2 Mondays that were, I think 6 hours a day or so. And I used to do 45 hours every week, or every 3 weeks on a pose. And so that's what I'm used to, is this idea of long form painting in a way of really investigating and understanding an individual that's in front of you. And so that's kind of what's led me to the painter that I am right now. Like, your schooling really dictates a lot about who you are as an artist. Even the types of paint that you can afford can affect how you paint, the type of teachers you have that kind of push and pull you, the type of family you have. Everything really makes you who you are as an artist. That you're really the sum of your experiences and how you choose to create and follow certain paths and different directions as an artist. That said, I've come to the realization probably about 5 or 6 years ago that I thought about painting as a way of living a life as opposed to a way of making a living as an artist, which is very indicative of the quote by Robert Henry. You guys all know Robert Henry is the art spirit. He's like my guru. You know, John Sloan also wrote a book. Do you guys know John Sloan? So he was a student of Robert Henry. It's called The Gist of Art. It's like a very sarcastic version of the art spirit in a way, because he was a little bit more acerbic a little bit. He didn't sell a painting till he was 45 years old, you know, but he still was really working hard to be an artist and a painter. Definitely check out The Gist of Art. You can get it on eBay for pretty affordable. You can still get first editions of Robert Henry's The Art Spirit on eBay for probably like 40, 50 bucks. I have a few of them. It's pretty awesome. 1923, Lippincott was when it was published. I'm a huge art historian of the Ashcan School and the 8, because when I moved to New York City, I was so engrossed with New York City and the artists that were there that really painted socially. They painted the people that were living in the tenement, in the Tenderloin in New York City at the time, and the idea of documenting real life and being a realist, not a realistic style necessarily, but a realist as to what they saw. And they were illustrators that were sent out by newspapers to go and meet the people and report on fires that were happening in this area or that area. So they had to work quickly to be able to have things that were be able to be reproduced as a plate, an engraving or whatever within the newspaper the next day or the next week. News was a little slower back then, the news cycle. So, but Robert Henry is one of my ultimate favorite artists. Even though I don't paint like him, you know, it's just a philosophy of an artist that really speaks to me. Like, I'm a huge Antonio Lopez Garcia fan, right? Just because of his work ethic, to be able to spend 10 years on a painting and just be able to have that patience, is something that I want in my work. So I tend to take really long time with my work. So I guess like a really big breakthrough painting for me early on was a self-portrait I did when I was 30. And it was this idea that I was actually kind of breaking the rules of what I was taught. I was taught to be a quick painter and to be brushy and expressive, but my temperament is totally different. My temperament's along the lines of Antonio Lopez Garcia, really take my time and focus on things and really try to, if a painting takes me 4 months to do it, that's okay. There's that saying, a brushstroke lasts longer than the hand that made it. Have you guys heard that before? And so for me, if it takes me an extra 3 months to do a painting, I'll take that 3 months as opposed to rushing something to get it done. I'm trying not to make product. I'm trying to make an experience for myself. Again, living as a means of living a life as opposed to making a living as an artist. And I feel that if you follow your heart and do what you really are involved in and you really care about what you're painting, then you're going to be fine. You'll find a way to make a living. You'll teach or anything to supplement. Hey, gorgeous. You'll develop yourself and you'll find ways to survive to be able to make those paintings that you really believe in. And the work will be better because you love it, Anyway, had a few beers before this lecture because I'm slightly extroverted but more introverted, so seeing a lot of people is scary. So bear with me. So this is a painting I did early on of my mom. And these look really red on the screen. So my mom and I don't have the best relationship. She lives in Florida, and I don't see her very often. And so doing this painting for me was a way of spending a lot of time with her. And it's really interesting, like I was painting her hands, and people had told me, well, that looks good, you can stop. And I'm like, well, I know the message is sent for the painting, but for me, it was kind of like this idea that I was dwelling in a therapy session where thinking of my mom's hands when I was having flashbacks to being when I was a little kid. Your mom's hands are the first hands that hold you, subconsciously. And just being to understand that and paint those, it would bring me back to these moments that are kind of like undescribable in a lot of ways. And so again, painting again is that experience and that idea of being present. There's a close-up. And I tend to do a lot of figures within formalistic, flat backgrounds to kind of create volume within the figure. So a portrait of my father. I did it for the same reasons as I painted my mom. So I used to paint my gallery, right? So galleries will try to tell you what to paint. They tell you things like, oh, maybe you should paint a sweeter subject. And you're like, no, you want me to paint a young, pretty girl because that'll sell, or something like that, And they're like, you don't have to treat me like I'm stupid and I don't know what you're trying to tell me, And so I was going on this path of painting like my family and trying to understand them, and my gallery was like, well, okay, we'll show these. We don't know if they'll sell or whatever. And so I've been lucky to be able to teach and do workshops where I haven't had to rely on gallery sales. And here's a close-up. Again, this looks kind of red. I think it's my computer. Here's another older piece. And I'm really interested in grunge graphic design. Do you guys know Ray Gun Magazine from the 90s and David Carson, where broken typography? And so I lived in New York City at the time, in Brooklyn, and you pass by construction barricades that have advertisements that were plastered on there, and then they've been ripped apart. And you could find like really beautiful designs, graphic designs that could be paintable all over the city. And so I was really inspired by a lot of that within my work early on. So anyway, so I'm doing this big project now for the last 5 years where I've been going around and painting Holocaust survivors. So I've been traveling around the United States, luckily through grants and friends of mine that have supported me, and also even made it out to Europe, through Poland and London and a little bit of Canada and Toronto to meet survivors. And so I'm having a show tomorrow which opens up, you guys are all invited, at the USC Fisher Museum on the USC's campus. Take an Uber, because parking there is really weird. I don't know. And so the first painting in the series of that, well, I'm going to show you guys a trailer. I don't know how sound is working on here at all. Does this sound work if I hit the space bar?
We'll find out, I'm not sure.
Okay. So I made a trailer for some of the people that I've met within the project, some of the survivors. Okay, there's no sound. Anyway, I'll narrate. So this is a combination of all the people that some of the people that I've met that are in the exhibition. And so it's called Facing Survival. It started out as the Yadut Project, which means living witness in Hebrew. And then working with the museum and the Shoah Foundation, they want to market things and do things kind of differently. And so then it was the Resilience Project, but they didn't like the word resilience because in the Holocaust, a lot of people died, unfortunately, through luck, or like lived through luck. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that the people who died weren't resilient. It's just that they were in the wrong place at the wrong time and happened to be Jewish, which is horrible, and other nationalities and sexual orientations. And a lot of people, so they didn't really have any control over that. And so the idea of resilience didn't mean that people who had passed away or had died or been murdered weren't resilient. So they didn't want to use that title. So we came up with Facing Survival in our living room last January as a way to title the show, which is actually really beautiful because the survivors have been facing survival with survivor's guilt, as well as speaking up for people that haven't survived, and then people coming to the show are seeing survival, so they're facing survival. And I'm giving a face to survival, a personal face as an artist to survival. And here he's saying David Kassan is his favorite artist. Maybe. So I guess I won't play any video, which is great. Now I got to talk the entire time. The video is my way of... So this is a big painting that I've been working on of 11 survivors of Auschwitz. So they're all based out here in LA, and I met them at the Museum of Tolerance in 2017, where it was amazing. I wanted to do a painting that I thought would be something big and indelible and have a lot of weight to it and meaning, because it has the meaning of all the stories and testimony that each of these 11 survivors are bringing to the painting. Something like, I post a lot on Instagram and Facebook, and I get a lot of deniers that post on my wall and stuff, and it's really frustrating. I try to delete them before they make it out or have any voice at all. But this is Hannah. She's so beautiful. Sorry. Her mother's an artist, and that's one of her mom's paintings. And so it's a 5-panel piece. Here's a question. Does anybody know what a 5-panel piece is called? You know like what a diptych is, right? Is 2. Do you know a triptych is... What is it? Penta? Anybody? It's not penta. Shayna knows. It's actually called a polyptych. I didn't know that until the curator said, "Oh yeah, you're a polyptych." I'm like, "My what?" So like many panels after triptych, it goes to polyptych. Yeah, learn something new every day. This is Elsa. She's become a grandmother for us. Like she lives in Albuquerque, where I moved to Albuquerque about 2 years ago. And anyway, so this was the Yadut project. I thought it was cool having a logo with Hebrew in it, but it doesn't read for other people. I kept having to explain what does Yadut mean to everybody. So branding. So the whole project, how it started was I was teaching in Israel for about 2 weeks. There's an amazing artist there, Ron Gershundi. Do you guys know him? Aram? He has a school there called Tachana. It means the train station. And he invited me to teach for 2 weeks. And it was really interesting going to Israel. It's actually a very secular place. And I went there and I learned a lot about my Judaism. I'm ethnically Jewish, but kind of grew up secular. My parents didn't have any real religion in the house at all or anything. So I don't know much about the cultural history of my ethnicity, I've been learning a lot about it. My fiance, who is Jewish, says I'm only Jew-ish. which is cool. Her name is Shayna. You guys know Shayna Levinson? She's an amazing painter also. I'm a big fan of hers. And Shayna actually means beautiful in Hebrew, or Yiddish, sorry. In Yiddish, Shayna Putum. So I think her mom named her perfectly. The middle name, I'm not sure, Janelle? I don't know. Her mom's here in the audience, over there, Diane, and her dad, Ron. So Israel was amazing. I flew into Tel Aviv, got to see Dome of the Rock, the wall. Got to do some landscape painting. This is looking out towards Masada, and don't judge, I'm not a landscape painter, but it's just fun. I think of landscape painting as a way of making a concrete memory. You know, I'm actually there. I remember what it felt like with the wind and the heat, what it was like to hear, like when I've been in Italy, I've done this, and I remember hearing construction and in the distance, and it really is better than taking a photo and moving on, because you're actually being proactive with life and being there to capture a memory. It doesn't matter what you create. Again, it's the experience of being there and being present. And that's what I ended up with. I got to ride a camel in the desert. It's literally you're driving and it's like a roadside stop where they had a camel. And so my buddies are all Israeli, and they're like, "You're going to ride a camel." I'm like, "Okay." And it's weird. There's one girl in the green is taking my photo, and I don't know who she is at all. It's so funny. And then she's still taking my photo. I don't get it. It's so weird. So when I got back from Israel, I started filming. I did an instructional documentary, and I filmed this woman, Jace, and I broke up the documentary in a way that it was instructional for about an hour, and then you have about 10, 15 minutes of interview with her, find out about her life, because I wanted the video to kind of show people that if you're painting another human being, you know, it's not just a breadbasket, it's not a still life, it's another human that's there, and to try to get as much humanity as you can and empathy for that person within your painting as well. And so I started filming everything, and so when this project kind of happened, I wanted to film the survivors and their stories. And so I work with a videographer/photographer, Chloe Lee, and she helped me film this. It's funny, there's Jace being like, "Yeah, I don't really like your painting." And so when the whole impetus of this whole project was when I got back from Israel, and an Israeli collector actually had contacted me about doing a portrait commission for him. And I was like, "Thank you so much. I really appreciate that you like my work and you want to commission me, but I actually don't do commissions right now." I was feeling where I wanted to just focus on the paintings of my mom and my dad and be kind of insular and do personal type of work. And I was teaching so I could supplement my income. I didn't have to sell a painting at that time or make a sale. So I was lucky. And then he goes, "Well, you know, it's for my mother-in-law. She's really special. She's a survivor of the Shoah." And at that moment, I was like, "I'll do it. I'll paint her. It's not a commission. You can purchase it if you want, but you know, I want to experience her story in a painting. That would be amazing." And so he gathered up photos of what I did and everything. He showed her, and she didn't want to be painted by me, unfortunately. She was like, "You know, he's a little too raw and too realistic. I don't know. He shows all the wrinkles, you know." So unfortunately, she declined to be painted. But about a month after I got back from Israel, one of my students who I had taught in Israel came to visit me in my studio in Brooklyn. And she said that her parents were both survivors. I was telling her a story about this woman I wanted to paint, and she's like, "Oh, well, you can paint my parents. Like, they live here." Her father lived in Fort Lee. Her parents were separated. Her father lived in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and her mother lived in Forest Hill, Queens, with her sister. Rosalind was her mother's sister, so her aunt. Just want to make that clear. And there were actually fraternal twins that were both survivors as hidden children right outside of Warsaw in Poland at the time. And so I was like, "Yeah, it'd be great. I'd love to meet your father." And so the first subject of my series, which wasn't a series at that moment, it was kind of me just wanting to do this painting, you know, that so disappointed that I couldn't meet the collector's mother-in-law, I was like, this is a great idea. This is somebody I want to meet, was Sam Godofsky. So I met with Sam at the gallery in New York, and it was funny, I didn't even know, I've been learning, actually did an interview with Discovery Channel Education yesterday, and they were interviewing me about this project that I'm working on. And I was like, wow, I've interviewed survivors, and I know I don't stick to questions at all. And I remember the gallery assistant printing me out these rigid questions to ask a Holocaust survivor that were made on a website for, I think, the USC Shoah Foundation at the time. And I was like, well, okay, these are all kind of almost impersonal questions. And so I, as an interviewer, I just have them talk. And then if things do get kind of deep and kind of hard to handle for them, I automatically ask them about their family. Tell me about your grandkids, tell me about your daughter, as a way of kind of making the paintings not about what they've been through necessarily, but what they've overcome and who they've become. A lot of the survivors have, I hate even just, they're so, they're labeled as survivors, right? But that's not how they should be. Like, Sam is a developer, and he owns a hotel in New York, and he has a striving family. That's how he should be described, as opposed to just a survivor of the Holocaust, because for the first part of his life, he didn't have control over his life at all. For the last 75 years, 72 years, I think, when I painted him, he's had control over his life, and he's thrived. He hasn't waned from that. So this is the first painting in the series. It's a cropping of Sam. And then this one moves. Here's a close-up. Yeah.
Did he choose what he wore?
Yeah. I don't try to force anything at all. It's crazy. I did once, because I really like Vincent Desiderio. I think he came and spoke here a few years ago or whatever, and I saw a painting of his where he had two figures, and when I went to go paint Rosalind and Bella, and they were both like 87 years old, I was like, oh, we should have one on this level and one on this, because I'm imagining this composition. And they just couldn't move into those spots, and I felt bad. I'm like, okay, we don't want anyone to break anything. Okay, well, just, you guys do what you guys do. How do you want to be painted? So I've kind of adopted that idea where I want their posture and stance to be natural to who they are and how they hold themselves. Even like looking at the camera when I photographed them for the painting. Unfortunately, I can't work from life with the subjects because they can't sit for me for that long. I've been lucky to be able to do some demos with some survivors where they're telling testimony to the audience that's watching me draw. And the drawing just doesn't mean anything. It's amazing. I'm like sitting there, I'm listening as they're talking, and they're moving around, and as we want subjects to be relatively still when we paint them as artists. But I'm just kind of like, nobody's looking at me. No one cares what I'm even doing. But I'm so glad that people did care to at least come here to hear the story from the survivor. So I did an event in LA about 2 years ago with Joshua Kaufman, who's a survivor. And people in the audience were people that had come across the border, who were dreamers, that were studying, wanted to be artists. And they felt a lot of kinship with Joshua's story and what he had been through and with what their family had just recently been through. It was really interesting to see them come up and talk to him and talk about what's going on today in the world based on what had happened already in the past. So I think that it's a way of, I've found that not purposely in any way, shape, or form, that doing these paintings that are full of as much humanity as I can give them and try to be as respectful to who they are, that other people will see humanity in them. And hopefully that the paintings will be able to fight some type of hate in some type of way, that someone maybe who is like a neo-Nazi or whatever will see humanity or see their grandparents in these survivors and hear their story and then be like, why am I like this? Why do I do this? So that's kind of, I didn't plan on that as a goal, you know what I mean? As a painter, unfortunately, I'm pretty selfish, you know what I mean? As a painter, I always wanted to get better at painting for me, you know what I mean? I want to be able to put food on my table as an artist, but being able to find a purpose for the work outside of myself has been the most rewarding aspect of the project so far. I'm not even showing you guys art, I'm sorry. There's Sam with the painting. These are my favorite photographs when I get the survivors with the paintings and they actually like it. Because not a lot of people like it when I paint them. Didn't Sargent say something like that? If you want to lose a friend, paint them, or something like that, like one of his quotes. And it's something. A portrait painting is just something wrong with a painting with something wrong with the nose. Is that what it is, Joe? Yeah. With the mouth, yeah. So Bella and Rosalind, they were the second subjects within the painting series. Well, now it became a series. And I was funding the videographer myself to be able to capture the footage. And so it's all been, most of the people within New York City and Albuquerque, because I live there, were all self-funded. So I've been lucky enough to get people who, it's so weird, painting is so hard for people to have an imagination about, to want to help and fund, I've learned. It's crazy. I think because it's such an analog, old school, traditional type of medium, it's not like a movie, you know what I mean? But there's so much probity that you can have within a painting that movies can be faked, and even with like deep faking now with video and stuff, I think that painting is going to have more of a power because of that. So that's with Bella and Rosalind. That's her when she was little. Doesn't she look so insane and tough? I love it. This is the painting of them. So they were separated when they were little. They were 12 years old when the Nazis invaded Poland, and they lived right out in a town outside of Warsaw. Their mom had this foresight to move them to a town where nobody knew who they were. They didn't know their ethnicity. They didn't know they were Jewish, and then separated them. Bella, I think, went with a Catholic family, and Rosalind went with a Polish family. And they would meet on the sidewalk. They had blonde hair and blue eyes, so they were actually able to get around and kind of blend in. And they were hidden children, like hidden in daylight. And really amazing stories. I recommend you guys all go. I have a YouTube channel where I've been recording their videos and their testimony a little bit. Check it out if you can. And there's a close-up. And unfortunately, they both passed away last year, which is really teaching me a lot about the urgency of what I've been doing. Is that the exhibition I'm having at USC has, I think, 22 survivors, and of the 22, 5 have passed away since I started. And I've only been doing the project for 5 years so far. But we're doing the show for them now, I want their voice to be heard, even though they're not around to talk anymore. They can be around to talk, is really important. And this is one of my favorite photos. My New York City gallery has been really supportive of the project, so they've been putting the paintings up, and they took this photo for me when I was in Albuquerque when they had visited the gallery. Elsa Ross is like our personal best friend now. She's like a grandmother. She just moved to Houston. What is that, a year ago? Shay, about a year ago? She used to own this boutique that was like a fancy clothing, is it consignment? It was, well, they would bring in name brands within Albuquerque, and it was on Central Avenue, which is like Route 66, but it was near a place called Nob Hill, which is like the fancy area of Albuquerque. And she was pretty well known in the town for having this Elsa Ross boutique. And Shayna was shopping at Whole Foods one day, checking out, and I guess Elsa Ross had been following Shayna's work on Facebook or something through mutual friends, and I guess vicariously through me also. From seeing your posts about me, she had seen some of my work, and she had stopped Shayna and said, Shayna, I want to talk to you. I love what you're painting. I love what David's painting, and I'm a survivor. I would love to talk to David. And so she's doesn't talk about it at all. And this kind of opened her up to talk about posing for me, helped her to kind of talk about it. Right, Shay? Did you say? And so she was a hidden child who was smuggled out of the Warsaw ghetto when she was only 5 years old in a workman's truck. And she never saw her parents again. She was picked up from an orphanage where she was put by an aunt by marriage, I believe. And she actually she has this poignant story about how she like kind of saw the silhouette of this woman, and at first she thought it was her mother coming to pick her up, and that her aunt, because she's only 5 years old, had to tell her like, no, I'm not your mother, and her heart like broke at that moment. She's been amazing. In the video that you guys didn't see, the trailer, she talks about unconditional love, because she didn't have unconditional love until she had her own children from anybody. There she is. So my gallery was amazing. They put these on the wall in August, unfortunately. Nobody's at the gallery in August, so they can put anything on the walls they want. Because in New York City, it's like the summertime, nobody shop, or everybody's in the Hamptons that has money in New York City. So, but it's awesome. This kind of gives you an idea of the scale. I try to paint everybody as life-size as possible. The idea is that you come up to the painting, you can have a conversation to them, just like you have a conversation with another human being. You know, like, you're life-size to me. I'm just farther back from you, you know? So the idea is that they're in your space in some way, shape, or form. So Luis and Lazar Farkas, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, this is her friend Shirley's parents from Austin, who are originally from Queens. And Diane put me in touch with Shirley, and I called her on the phone. I remember I was walking my dog once in the neighborhood, talking to her on the phone about painting her parents, Luis and Lazar. And so this is the painting of them in the studio. This is my homage to American Gothic, right? You guys see it? It's pretty obvious. They have a really interesting story. So Luis grew up in Signet, Hungary, which is where Elie Wiesel wrote Night about. If you guys have ever read Night, or it's all about the liquidation of Signet, going to the ghetto, and then liquidation of the ghetto, and sending people to Auschwitz. And so she went through that at 19 years old, which is really, it's like this connection to history that's really incredible. And Lazar, he used to live in the Czech Republic, or I forget what they call it now. They want to call it like Czechia? Czech Republic, but I actually heard it's not Czech Republic anymore, from someone that was just there, supposedly. Anyway, he lived in Czechoslovakia at the time, and so he would go across the border in the Signet to meet girls before the war. And he had met Luis and liked her and everything, and they kind of had a really strong friendship. And then World War II kind of came through, and everything kind of happened. At the end of the war, he actually escaped from a Czech work camp at the time, and was able, towards the end of the war, and went looking for her across the border. And she actually had gone north of the border, and he had gone south of the border at one point, but they eventually did find each other again. And then they got married and moved to Queens, New York, which is amazing, emigrated to the United States. And I like to add kind of implicit formalistic elements within paintings. So the line behind them is actually represents the border of the Czech Republic, or of Czechoslovakia at the time, and Hungary. They were on the cover of the Portrait Society magazine. They've been really supportive of the project. They let me present there last year. That's my buddy Ryan. I just got to put Ryan in the. He's another artist that shows at my gallery. And one day he sent me this in a text message of him looking at the painting. And it kind of looks like the Art Collector, the Norman Rockwell painting, which I thought was funny. So I received a grant from the Jerry Goldstein Foundation, which is really supportive for me to come to Los Angeles to meet as many survivors as I could. And I had this idea in my head where I was doing 1- and 2-figure paintings, but I wanted to make something even larger. So I was thinking like 6 survivors in one painting would be big and epic. And I talked to a woman at the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles, and she recommended that she could get a whole group of survivors, maybe Auschwitz survivors, could be something that united everybody, that had a common theme between the subjects. I was thinking families that were all survivors, or somehow having people connected relationship-wise. And she recommended the Auschwitz survivors, and I was like, well, how many can you get, do you think? She's like, oh, if you're here next week, I think we have 11 survivors that can pose for you. And I'm like, okay, we'll do an 11-figure painting. I'm not, yeah, we'll try it. You know what I mean? And so Jerry's Goldstein Foundation, I think they give grants to artists. You guys can definitely check it out. I know some people that worked at the company, and so I was able to talk to some people and pitch the idea. And they love the idea of preserving history in this kind of way, and so they were super supportive to get me and my videographer to Los Angeles. One of the first survivors we met there was Joshua Kaufman. His daughter, Judy, was actually pretty instrumental in me meeting with the people at the Museum of Tolerance. They're really connected to the museum, and Alana Samuels, who's the survivors coordinator there, who books all the survivors to speak at the museum. If you go to the Museum of Tolerance, you can hear a survivor tell you their testimony live. Almost, I think every day they have like 2 survivors that do it. So I totally recommend that. It's way better than watching a video or even seeing a painting, So I also, at this time, I did a live painting event with Joshua at Safe House Atelier. My buddies Sean Barber and Carl Dobsky helped me out. This is their studio that they had. I think it's not around anymore, unfortunately, but they let me use the space to do this benefit kind of thing where you could come and listen to survivors. I think it was like $20 to watch me draw. And this is what I was saying about the idea that the drawing didn't even matter, because what he was saying was so impactful to everybody. It transcended having to be an artist in a way, and just doing my sketch. We filmed an interview with Josh. He's a plumber who lives in West Hollywood, which is incredible. And he's probably in his late 80s. So this is Joshua. This is a close-up of the painting. That's the full painting. That's my secret weapon right there. My son, painting in the background with the palette knife, getting some texture in. This was last year. This is when I completed the painting, and Joshua got to see it for the first time. Joshua's really tall. I think he's probably like 9 feet tall. I think everybody's 9 feet tall compared to me. And so this is the big painting. I call it Bearing Witness, because I feel like the stories that are inherent within the painting of the subjects is really important. Again, more so than the painting. If the painting is an outlet for people to hear these stories, then I've succeeded, as opposed to it being technically good. So I met with 11 survivors at the Museum of Tolerance, showing them kind of like what I did as a painting. I think one guy's like, "Ew, that's horrible." And they're like, "We're gonna check text messages. I think they're playing Candy. Look at my Candy Crush score. It's better than yours." This is Betty and Morris. I love that they're on like technology, a text message. I think they're doing Instagram, or they're TikToking. That's the new thing. They're doing TikTok. So we filmed interviews with them. We only had 2 hours with the survivors at the Museum of Tolerance. So I had to take photos of 11 people and interview them, people who I didn't want to rush at all. I set it up purposely on a stage. I went to go see Les Mis with Shayna in New York City on Broadway, and we were lucky to have like 3rd row seats or 4th row seats at an angle where everybody was like in proportion. It was really amazing. And so I told myself if I ever did a big painting, I wanted to photograph people from the midsection as if they were on a stage, like I had seen in Les Mis, so that the proportions would be okay. I'm really into proportions because I want them to be realistic. I want them to be like we are. I'm not a mannerist where I want to mess with proportions and distort things. And so that kind of stuck with me when I did this painting, was I wanted everybody to be on that same level on a stage. It was a birthday present. I tried to surprise her. It's so funny. I tried to surprise her with Broadway show tickets, and then she tried to surprise me with a party at my local bar with all my friends, and then one of my friends knew that I was going to get her tickets, and then she was going to surprise me on the same day, and so I had to change my tickets. And the tickets I got were better than the tickets I originally gotten, so it all worked out. Our birthdays are 5 days apart, so So I started doing studies for the painting digitally right after I had actually met them on the iPad, literally on the flight. So these are digital sketches on the iPad. Really just trying to figure out positioning of hands. I wanted it to be all about the hands and the faces. The clothing, I just kind of wanted to fade into the dark. I haven't seen the painting yet, how they've lit it, so I'm kind of scared of the museum. I've never had a museum show like this before in my entire life, and it's an insane honor, but it's also, you have to relinquish control, which scares the crap out of me as an artist, because we all want to, I tell all my friends, I'm like, I don't know if it's daylight bulbs or whatever, if it's 5,600 Kelvin like I painted them, but I'm just excited to show people the work and hopefully have some type of an impact, through telling these stories. And so I did studies also, so I travel a lot, so I would take references and bring them places and do studies in a sketchbook, in a moleskin. And so these are Henry's hands, and they're all done with a color erase pencil, which is an erasable color pencil, which kind of is like brownish, kind of, almost, it's a little redder than this image. Kind of has an old mastery feel, I don't know, a little bit. And I started playing with ink a little bit. These are Renee's hands. This is Martin's hands. This is a painting I haven't finished yet. Martin Greenfield is a tailor that lives in Brooklyn. And I didn't want to rush his painting for the exhibition, so I'm kind of holding off on that painting a little bit. I hate deadlines for trying to finish artwork because I could work on things for years. And I love that. I don't want sometimes to finish a painting, So this is a painting I want to savor, doing the studies and everything for this. And I did portrait studies as well, which are charcoal drawings. These are about 20 by 12.5 inches. And I take notes on the paintings about the person as well. Oh, this is Betty Cohen. She's from Holland. This is Ella. Or I'm sorry, this is, Elizabeth Mann. Sorry. She's a bacteriologist. I've met about 40 survivors now doing this project. I haven't painted everybody. Some of the stories are getting kind of a little mixed up in my head, fortunately. This is Renee Firestone. Amran. And so I paint on acrylic mirror, which is a little different. It's a surface that I found that gives the painting a little bit more, what I think is a little bit more depth and luminosity, because light hits, if you don't have a light on it, it looks dead, because there's nothing reflecting back within the painting. And so the idea is that, our darks are more transparent than our lights. Our lights sit on that surface and they're thicker versus our darks, which are more transparent. And we want our darks to have more depth, less texture, so that they sink in. But I want my lights to come forward. And so the idea is that this is, it's acrylic, so it's plastic, and it's about 1/8 inch thick of clear plastic, and then underneath it is a mirror that shines through. So the idea is, imagine you have like a thick glass table and you're painting light paint on top of that, right? Thick light paint. It really sits on that surface, almost where you can see a shadow of the white paint that you put on top. And then when you glaze your darks, which are thinner and more transparent, you can see through them just slightly into the mirror, a little bit more depth, while your lights come forward a little bit more. But nobody can really see that except for me, supposedly. Shayna's like, I don't know why you do this. You're the only one who notices any difference. And she's probably right. But I love it. I love the surface. And I love just this idea conceptually that, it's almost like there's that clear part of the painting that's almost like a vessel for the stories that I'm painting as well. Just metaphysically, just of having that part of it being an object that can kind of hold a presence in a way. It sounds kooky, I know, but it's something I like conceptually. And so I started the painting, and my beautiful fiance got me a bottle of champagne to kind of christen. This is like the biggest painting. It's going to take 2 years to do. You can do this. And so what I do is, how I prep the panel is I sand it lightly, and then I do an oil glaze. And I rub oil paint into it to glaze it, almost like you're oiling an intaglio plate. Do you guys ever ink up an intaglio plate? And you literally, you ink it up and then you rub the ink off of it? That's what I do with this, except in a lot of paper towels. Not good for the environment. not at all. And so I just kind of started blocking in figures on one side of the painting and just adding figures as I went. And it's almost like painting's been almost like a metaphor for me moving to Albuquerque. So I took over Shayna's studio, right? She has this big studio where we teach out of, and I thought the studio was kind of cluttered, a little bit. And so I started on one end by the door with the first panel, and then I added the second panel. I kept moving along the wall, and I kept painting the walls gray as I moved around until I had more. There's the idea of scale with this weirdo in there. Oh, I wish I could show you his interview, unfortunately, his testimony, but we're actually behind. I got to hurry up. Wait, was he going to talk? Did I hear something? Oh. So really quick, just to sum up, like the survivors I've met, it's really interesting because it's been 72 to 75 years, because I've been painting them for the last 5 years, since what they've been through. It was really frowned upon for them to talk about what they had been through at that time. And so a lot of the survivors said that they had this pent-up anger about, they wanted to share it, but nobody wanted to hear it, and then they were just angry about what they had been through, and they had kind of like revenge in a way. And as they've gotten older, they'd let go of all of that. And they've, Ava Schloss, who is actually Anne Frank's stepsister, I have a video of her, which I can't show because there's no audio, but she talks about this idea of, talking about it and really being there to talk about it for the people that couldn't talk about it really helped her to release her anger about anything. And it just gave her compassion more so. Like any anger she had was filled with this kind of idea of empathy for everybody, and just to not have anybody go through or treat anybody the way that she was treated. And it's really been interesting to see how people have coped with what they've been through. It's been a full spectrum of humanity by meeting these folks, and as a person that wants to paint and capture humanity in my art, it's been insanely rewarding for that, just to try to understand what people have been through. And so it started got to the corner of the studio. I moved my easel in from Brooklyn, got more of the wall, literally just started blocking in the subjects. And it's weird, because I always want to finish a painting all together all at once, not render an area and then render another area. And so it's always been like, how loose can I keep it and then bring it all together all at once? It's been a challenge. I still don't think the painting is finished in the museum. I was painting on it about 3 weeks ago. They let me in the museum for like 4 days to paint. This is Elsa, who is the survivor I painted early on. She went to visit the studio to see the painting, which is pretty remarkable. And so just to give you an idea of studies, so that was a study in the moleskin, which is only like 8 by 10 inches. And then there's like the painting of the finished hands. The chroma on this is really high, and the contrast, unfortunately. But there's an idea of the full painting as I was working on it. That's the full painting finished, in quotes. And the close-up, that's Betty and Elizabeth again. You guys saw their studies before. Betty has the highest score in Candy Crush out of all the survivors. And there's an idea of the sketch to the quote-unquote finish. This isn't a finished shot. There's Renee. There's Renee's hands and arms. I love painting arms and hands. I feel like that's really how we interact with life, through our hands. These are the backings that I had made for the painting. And working on a painting this size, I wasn't prepared for all the technical issues where my friends crafted these amazingly beautiful backings for the painting. And then the glue didn't stick in areas, and it started warping. And so there were these crazy air pockets, and so I literally had to scrape off the backs and throw them out after spending a fortune on having them made and shipped in from New Jersey and everything. And then we had some guy, a friend of ours in Albuquerque, have to make them for us. I had all these done by March, and I had to have everything to show August 1st. It turned into me getting everything done finally like a week before they had to go to the museum in August. And so it was just a lot of stress, yeah. And Shayna's been putting up with my stress, unfortunately. But it was crafted so out of black walnut. Don't use black walnut, by the way, it warps. Use Baltic plywood. I know this now. For the painting I do of the 50 survivors, that's going to be 50 feet. Maybe, I don't know. I think this is just the beginning. I want to do something bigger and better the next thing. This is Roman Kent, so he's another survivor I met in Manhattan. It was really cool. So I did this lecture at John Swigart's potluck, and Roman's son was in the audience, which I thought was amazing. He flew in from New York for the show. And so I was setting up the cameras to photograph and the videotape, and I brought my son with me so he could hear his testimony live. And I turn around, and Roman's playing Go Fish with my son, which I thought was incredible. And there's the painting of Roman. He's holding a piece of artwork that his son, Jeff, made for him of him and his wife in Auschwitz. It was a cut paper piece. And then Jeff, his son, had written this poem in it in the tiniest handwriting in the world. And so I had to replicate his handwriting. This is Hannah. So you saw her in the video. She was showing a painting that her mother had done. Her mother was an artist, and her mother recorded her memories through paint at the time of the synagogue that had been burned in their village. And her family was unique because they went towards Russia versus towards the United States when the Nazis had occupied Poland. So I started this tradition with the survivors where I say, hey, do you guys have scotch? And we have scotch together, which leads to some really weirdness. So this is George Fodor. He lives in San Antonio, and he loves his iPad, and he loves taking pictures in photo booth with his iPad. And so things can get crazy when you have scotch and an iPad. Just saying. And so we did a fundraiser in Aspen through the Shoah Foundation. They've been amazing in supporting the project. And I become really, this is Selma Hollow. We did a little panel discussion. Selma Hollow, the weirdo in the salmon shirt. I don't know why that was a good idea. I didn't, oh, thanks, babe. And then Hannah. And so we were able to raise money so I could travel, right? So I did a 13 or 14-day trip through, we did a couple days out in LA. We met with a survivor in New Jersey. From New Jersey, we flew up to Toronto. Toronto, we flew over to London. London, we went to Warsaw, and then we trained over to Krakow, and then we flew home. I flew to Albuquerque, and Chloe, my videographer, flew to New York, where she lives. And so we got to meet these amazing survivors here. Naomi Blake, Pincus, Ed Mossberg, Ellie Gotts, Ben Hofgott. It's just incredible. Ed Mossberg lives in New Jersey, and I just met with him right before I came out here to California, actually, really quickly. This is Ed. So Ed's amazing. He's a developer in New Jersey, like a real estate developer, and has this amazing family that's insanely supportive. And he's got a beautiful wife who's also a survivor. And so he has a concentration camp uniform that's not his original uniform. He actually purchased it on eBay as a way of, he really owns him being a survivor, and he wants to speak as loudly as possible to as many people that will hear in as blunt a way as possible for the people that haven't survived in his family. He was the only one to survive in his entire family. And so he wants to pronounce that in every way that he can. His wife had said that, we were liberated in 1945 by the Russians, and we left the camps, but Ed never left the camps. So that's how he copes with it, is by owning it. He has a bracelet with his number on it. A lot of survivors wanted to hide their numbers, and they were ashamed of his numbers, and he's not ashamed of it. He's proud of it, And so when I met him, I did this sketch on our way to Toronto, just on the plane. I carried the moleskin as a way to kind of connect with the survivors while I was traveling. And so I sent the drawing to the head of the Shoah Foundation, who knows Ed pretty well. And he was like, well, you know, this is great, but it's a little thoughtful. Like, Ed's a fighter. Can you get, like, make him a fighter in the painting? And I was like, yeah, I agree. You know, meeting him, he's a little fierier, you know? And so I did this sketch study and took in notes, started doing the painting. And so I didn't realize it, but I made him like a boxer in the painting. You know, he's holding a photograph of his wife, but I feel like I lucked out that his stance was how he wanted to be, portrayed. Nothing was forced at all. He was like, here's this Torah necklace that he has with a picture that opens up of his wife at that time. This was another awesome video. So I traveled to London to meet the amazing Ava Schloss, who loves art. And I love being in her house because she has this painting of a woman artist over her like couch, which I thought was amazing. Right? So Ava is Anne Frank's stepsister. So Ava and her mother survived Auschwitz, but her father and her brother Heinz didn't. And so her mother ended up marrying Otto Frank. So if you guys know the Anne Frank story or not, like Anne Frank's family passed away or were murdered, except for Otto Frank. He survived. And so Otto Frank married her mother, who was a survivor. And this is the video. This is an amazing video. I'd love to show you guys because she lives right by Abbey Road in London. And so she's showing us Abbey Road, and she's got this little Hyundai or whatever car. And she's like slowing down to show us, and she's being honked at, and she's like, yeah, 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 yeah. And she keeps driving, and she shows us, she slows down again to show us something, and she's like, and honk, honk, honk. She's like, yeah, 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 yeah. And then she went to park the car, so she like pulled around and is like backing up into the spot, backing up, backing up. All of a sudden, boof, you just hit the car that was behind as we were parallel parking, like pretty crazy, like everything shakes. And she's like, yeah, 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 yeah. And just like drives, just spins around and like nothing. Like completely OG. Oh, wait, but yeah, I have to fast forward it. It's really cute. She's amazing. And here's the portrait of her. Also in the video, you can see how this is her posture. She always has one hand over the other. We met with this amazing survivor, Marian Tursky, who's a journalist in Poland. And he said that he had like 3 friends that survived the Holocaust. He had Roman Kent, who I had painted earlier, Marian, and another guy I never got the name of. But he said that it was really interesting because as kids they were growing up together and they all survived. And Roman went to America to be a capitalist, he said. And he said, I stayed in Poland to be a communist. And he said, and their other friend went to like Canada to become a pacifist or something like, it was like really interesting how they all had these different worldviews but were really good friends. And so he's like a really liberal journalist in Poland, and he's well known in Poland for being a guy that started this amazing publication that challenges the government every now and then. And he's world renowned, and he has so much fire in everything he went through. He actually never gave a testimony to the Shoah Foundation, and I met with him. I only had like an hour with him, but he ended up spending 2 hours with us because he liked us. And he went through everything that he had been through. He gave us testimony through doing the project of being videotaped. And a huge compliment I got from Stephen Smith was like Stephen Smith had been trying to get him, he's the head of the Shoah Foundation, trying to get him to give a testimony, and he wouldn't. And so by doing the project, we created testimony, which wouldn't have been caught. So super rewarding again. This is a video of just me working on a painting of him. So I started doing these videos where I would do the sketch study of him, and this is from a photo that you can't see on camera. I hate showing the photo and my sketch because people compare, and it's not about that necessarily, you know? I'm not a machine, you know? I'm not gonna replicate this exactly as it is, but as I'm doing the drawing, and it's about 15, 20 minutes of me doing my sketch in my studio in Brooklyn, I would do these when I visit my son in Brooklyn. I didn't have a huge studio space, so I would work on these sketches and videotape them. And I voice over his testimony of what he told us live over the drawing being created. So you kind of learn about his story, and then you see the drawing kind of come into focus as I work on it, as I develop things. So it's on YouTube. You guys can check him out. I don't want to bore you guys with it. His testimony is really impactful, though. It's really strong. He talks about what the worst part of being in Auschwitz was. And what he says is it's not that he was starving. It wasn't that he was urinated on by being in the bottom bunk. He says it was that he was treated like an insect, that he was treated like lice. And that's just a lesson that just don't treat people like that. I can't even imagine like the idea that people are treated as other human beings. We're all human beings, you know? So frustrating today, sorry. Not gonna get political. This is Pincus, he's amazing. Pincus is incredible. He's also in the exhibition. I don't know if I got a painting of, the photo I took of him wasn't as good as the painting, and so I don't think I included it. I thought the painting actually, there's more variation in color. I'm a horrible photographer of artwork. And now like my Photoshop keeps doing different profiles, and like, do I want to use this in the working space of my Photoshop? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just so I'm technically challenged. This is Ben Hofgott. We're almost finished, guys, sorry. Ben Hofgott is, after he left the camps, he was part of a group called The Boys. They were refugees that ended up in England at the time, and they almost had like a group home for kids all his age that were displaced people from Europe that didn't have parents, and he grew up in this like group of guys called The Boys. And so he became a weightlifter and competed in the Olympics for England as a weightlifter. And he came out of the camps weighing 90 pounds, he said. And he's just amazing. And he kept trying to feed us these biscuits, like which are cookies. We were in London meeting him, and he was incredible. So I'm having the exhibition. It's at the Fisher Museum of Art. I love this museum because they really care about realism. You know, like I got recommended by one of my favorite painters and a mentor of mine named John Nava. Do you guys know John? John's incredible. I think he's a mentor for the MFA program. I highly recommend him as a mentor because he's got really great outlook as opposed to just being a realist painter, which I think is important. Technical stuff is really important, but the idea of having something that's meaningful to say with your work is, I think, just as important. You want to have that balance as an artist. And so he turned me on to Selma, who is the curator, and they also had a Dan McClary show. He's going to be here next week, right, on Monday? Try to sneak into the MFA painting room and say hi to Dan McClary. He's amazing. I got to spend some time with him about 2 weeks ago with John and Dan together, and they're just inspirations for me. The museum's huge, so the artwork is spread out, just warning you in advance. And this was Selma and Stephen in my studio in Albuquerque, Shayna and I's studio in Albuquerque, going through the exhibit. They were looking at my sketchbook. And another big inspiration, who I am very thankful for, is Shayna for helping me on the journey with Selma. And that's the painting in the museum right now. If you don't look at this right here, where I guess they had to push one panel to the other to get it to fit. I don't know what they're going to do in the museum. I haven't seen the exhibit completely up. I have a website that's going to launch pretty soon called Facing Survival. It's going to have the paintings with the videos that I've shot, as well as testimony, firsthand testimony that is actually also in the catalog. The catalog's cool. They actually transcribed the testimony of each survivor in their own words to go along with the painting in the catalog. And there's essays by Stephen Smith, who's absolutely brilliant about this stuff, and Selma, who's absolutely brilliant. And my fifth grade reading level and writing level is also in there in comparison. Very thankful. I have a Patreon page that people have donated to, which has helped me pay for videography. These companies have helped out tremendously. Rosemary's Brushes, the Portrait Society, the Goldstein Foundation. Super thankful for these guys, and that's it. Cool. Try to finish up. Cool. Cool. And thank you guys for coming. This is awesome. This is a huge honor. This is a school that I wish I would have gone to. It really is, because like hanging out with Peter, like he really cares about the students. It's amazing. My teachers didn't care.
We got some
Awesome.
time for a few questions.
Yeah. It said Kassan, not Kassan. Should I tell this funny story about that? Some of the people have heard it. I think Jeremy's heard it. Well, I was at a group show like maybe 7 or 8 years ago at my gallery, and I was looking at one of my paintings to see how it was hung, making sure it wasn't crooked or whatever. And I looked at it, and this woman next to me goes, "What do you think of the Kassan painting?" And I'm like, "Oh, I like it, but I think it's Kassan." And she goes, No. It's Kassan. I know him. I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I was like, cool. I was like, the painting is beautiful. You should buy it for Kassan. I don't know. Kassan sounds better. It's like French. I don't know. I should change it. No, it's Kassan. It was actually Kazatsker when they came over from Ellis Island. My grandfather escaped ethnic cleansing from the Cossacks to come to America in 1917 from the pogroms that were happening at that time, so the border shifted a lot, which is also why I kind of have been connecting with that past. I never got to meet him. He was kind of estranged from my family when I was little. My dad never talked about him because he left my dad's family. My dad was only 15 years old, and so I never met him at all. It's funny, my cousin met him because my uncles knew him as older and lived near him and stuff. But doing these paintings has been a kind of a way of connecting to his story as well, and trying to not having a grandparent, but then kind of seeking that out through other people. It's kind of weird. I don't know. Is there any questions at all? No? We're all going to Laguna Beach beer place afterwards? Yeah.
How many hours would you say you spend in a day painting? Like if it's a full day of painting?
Yeah, it all depends. Like our schedules are crazy. Shayna and I both have kids, and I could paint like 3 hours. It's funny. She's really motivated. Shayna is. We have a studio. We have like easels next to each other. It's kind of his and hers. It's kind of funny, but yeah, I don't think I paint as much right now because I've been doing like other stuff. I think as an artist, you have to do PR, you have to do marketing, you have to like get photos of all your artwork, you have to figure out how to get your artwork from here to there and do all this stuff. Painting right now for me I haven't painted that much. But I think before the show I was painting a lot. I'd go to the studio I tried to get there around 9 or 10 in the morning and work until about 5:30 or 6, depending on if I was cutting vegetables for dinner. Like I had to get home early, and if Shayna was like, "I'll get it today so you can have an extra half hour to work," I'm like, cool. So it was, when I was single, it was a little different. I would paint until like 4 in the morning, and I had no life. I wouldn't shower for a month. Just kidding, 2 months. Yeah, so it's all different. It's like weird with family life, you know what I mean? Things have become a little bit more regular than they were when I was single. Yeah. Good question. Yeah.
Yeah, you're in New York, so you're involved in that art scene, and you moved to Albuquerque.
Yeah.
I mean, how does it feel to be in Albuquerque, and what were the reasons that brought you to Albuquerque?
Yeah. Oh, good call. Yeah. Why did I move from New York City and the art scene in New York and the vibrancy of it to move to Albuquerque, and why did I move to Albuquerque? It's weird. I feel like New York is like an island. Like every artist is like their own island because it's so big. There would be people, like group shows would go, like actually exhibitions at museum or exhibitions at galleries, like Arcadia Gallery would bring all the artists together to like see an artist show. And then we wouldn't see each other for another 3 or 4 months, if that. And I don't really feel a great kinship with most of the New York City artists so much. It's almost like, yeah, I have a different kind of approach than they do in a lot of cases, and different kind of goals. I feel like a lot of people sometimes move to New York because they're type A personalities and they want to be a certain type of person or whatever. Maybe like LA also, I don't know. Why'd I move to Albuquerque? It's just a lot cheaper, way more affordable. I like Albuquerque because it has an authentic culture. It's not like moving to a suburb of Cleveland necessarily where it's all Olive Gardens and Outback Steakhouses. You have like authentic New Mexican cuisine, which is like, it's Hispanic influence, it's got Native American influence, and there's a culture there, which is authentic, which I love. And we have Santa Fe not that far away, which is kind of an art center in a way. It's kind of hippier art type stuff, and we bought a house together. We couldn't buy a house in Brooklyn. I bought a car. I haven't had a car in 20 years. So it's just been, we have more space. I don't know, I love it. My son lives in Brooklyn though with his mom, so I still kept an apartment in Brooklyn. So I still have an apartment there. So I can have New York City when I need it, but I still feel claustrophobic in New York, even after living there 20 years. So I feel like the LA group, you guys seem to have a tighter knit community than New York City does. I really do, because I was just at John Swigart's, potluck, and all these artists came in. Artist friends of mine that I hadn't seen in like 2-3 years came and showed up. It was amazing, and they're supportive. I feel like New York doesn't have that kind of support system, if that makes any sense. I think everybody's trying to be like famous or a rock star more so than they are trying to be an artist and have a community. Yeah, good question though. I just trashed every New York City artist. I don't know. I got you, Joe, next after this guy. He has his hand up. Do I still experiment with art? Yeah, I've kind of been a little bit not as experimental with the pieces I've been doing. Like I used to use a lot of graffiti and broken typography and design within pieces. That's kind of been shelved a little bit in favor of trying to tell the story more lucidly, as opposed to having any of my ideas get in the way of the painting. I wanted the story to kind of come through within the people, more so than my own design ideas. I'm actually starting a whole abstract painting series, probably as soon as the show's over. I have like 4 or 5 paintings that are planned out already that are almost just abstract textures that are really based in typography and a lot of David Carson's kind of ideas of graphic design. I used to be a graphic designer for 2 years in New York, and that's really filtered into what I enjoy within painting also. So it's not just painting the perfect light on a cheek or something like that. I want to think about design and composition more abstractly, more formalistically. So yeah, I'm so excited to do these paintings. They've been want to burst out of me for like 5 years, just to experiment. But I like using different surfaces, different materials, and stuff like that. I've always been into that. Yeah. Joe, you still got a question?
Yeah, so what do we do?
Yeah, it's funny though. I still study. Like, I still want to do other paintings and study a lot more. So I don't think that ever ends. I think you want to set yourself up so that you can experiment and study constantly. I think that having a community of artists and peers that you kind of want to perform for is super helpful for wanting to get better. Do you know what I mean? Like, my friends are way better artists than I am. Painters, that blow me away. Using Instagram as a way to humble myself is so easy.
Is anatomy important to you?
Anatomy? What's anatomy? No. Yeah, no, it is. Yeah. I don't think so. I don't think you need to know the name of everything. I think you need to know it's there. But I also think that some things should be perceptual. Some artists, I think, tend to over-accentuate the anatomy, where it turns into an anatomy study and a proof of what they know versus what they see. And so they lose the humanity in understanding the understructures of the anatomy and the muscles. But
We're studying that next course.
yeah, but I think you should know I think for what I'm doing, I really am involved in understanding what RTLs are, resting tension lines, and how that's formed, how the wrinkles on the face are formed and the rhythm of wrinkles are all formed by how the muscles in the face are, how it's pulling on the skin. Resting tension lines are what's used by plastic surgeons. So a resting tension line goes perpendicular to the muscle that's pulling the form. So like your eye is orsis oculi, which is like a racetrack around your eye, in your orbital cavity, right? Your perpendicular resting tension lines are going across that racetrack, so that's what forms these wrinkles. And so having that understanding of how, what I love is like the rhythm of the face is all built on the muscles of the face, like the rhythm of how these are pulling, and all that stuff, and how this is round. And so all that stuff informs a lot. But yeah, yeah. But I mean, I don't think you need to prove it. But yeah, because I can't tell you, I don't know anatomy like Michael Grimaldi knows anatomy. I'm not dissecting cadavers in a lab, understanding how things are, and people make that their life study, and I don't know, like if the amount of anatomy knowledge that Michael Grimaldi knows is in a bucket of water, I would know a teaspoon of that water, you know what I mean? I know just enough to get by to be able to be scaffolding for what it is I'm trying to represent as a painter. I came at it as being kind of a selfish thing, where it's like, I wish I read more. I wish, but instead of reading, I travel and I get to meet cultures. And so being a firsthand witness to these stories, it's been a way of me to understand what they've been through firsthand. Elie Wiesel had this quote that said, if you listen to a witness, you become a witness. And I love that idea of something being viral and a meme in a way, not like a funny meme, but a meme that is an idea that can catch fire and go viral. And so that idea of a witness, being a witness. And so he asked if I had an anxiety over having some type of cultural impact with what I do. I think I always wanted to have something social to say within my work. Maybe not. I think at first I wanted to survive as a painter and sell paintings. I just came to the point in my life where that Henry quote just kind of took over, where it's like I wanted to be a painter as a means to living a life as opposed to making a living as an artist, if that makes any sense. And I don't think I have any anxiety over it, just because I have no expectations about it. So I just want to make the best paintings to be able to transmit the ideas as well as possible. And if that message is sent, that's awesome. If it helps people outside of myself, that again would be way more rewarding to me than anything. But I don't have an expectation that that'll happen. I hope it does in a way, just because I want to put good things out in the world, if that makes any sense. I don't know. I need another drink. I don't know. Is that it?
Maybe time for one or two more questions? Then we have to relate.
I'm a Pisces? No, I don't know. That means, yes. I think that it depends on the time of day. She gets up way earlier than I do. She gets up really early, and you know what? We're at different time stamps of our journeys, because I've been painting a lot longer, and she's catching up really fast. She's surpassed me in a lot of things. She's painted a lot of my paintings for me. I have her work on some of the clothing in the big painting, and it's been amazing. But she's a lot more focused than I am. So she's inspiring to me. She just gets up and is so full of ideas, where I haven't had coffee yet. And I'm like, whoa, this is intense. And I think I used to have that fire, and I don't know if I do necessarily quite as much anymore. I've slowed down. I'm an old man, but she's inspiring in how she's developed in just a few years, how much she's gained in. It's like an infomercial for it. So, but I'm impressed by her. So, sometimes we don't get along, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's painting with your best friend and having them in the studio. It's incredible. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. So he asked if, how do you keep focus on being an artist when you have so much other, when there's so much to being an artist, emotionally and everything, how do you keep going, right? Is that a good sum up? Sorry. I don't know. It's weird. I guess like early on in high school, that it became my identity to be an artist in a way, and it's always been I want to be a better artist every day and learn and see the world in a better, more refined way within my art, and just be, it's therapy for me, you know what I mean, to sit and paint. If I don't paint for a while, I get grumpy. You know, I haven't painted, I painted today in class, which is just mind-blowing, but I was teaching, and then go back, I'd paint for maybe 20 minutes, so I'd teach a little bit, and it was, that was incredible. I haven't painted for like 3 weeks, and I'm like ready to do some art, like dying to do these abstract paintings. It just gets exciting for that stuff. I don't get painter's block ever. I call it painter's clog. I have too many ideas that I want to paint, and I gotta focus on one thing. Like when I moved to New York City, I was like, I would see the lights on the buildings and be like, I want to paint that. I want to paint that, or the people on the street, like I want to paint that person, or this thing, and it was like overwhelming. It was like, if I painted everything, it would be like eating all the desserts at once, and I would just throw up and wouldn't make anything good. And so then I was like, I'm going to focus on this, and then I'm going to focus on this so that I could stay sane, you know? But for me, I still want to go study with Joe. You know, I want to pick his brain about painting. I want to go study with Jeremy. I want to go study with, just do landscape painting. I want to do, I was talking at lunch about this, you know, that I want to do so much more than what I already do, because it's all like, it's refining how you see things. And so I don't think it would be, I don't define myself as an artist necessarily. I define myself as a guy that likes watching football on Sunday and telling bad jokes. And the art thing is kind of like there. This blows my mind that you guys came to watch me show artwork and stuff. It's awesome, you know? Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question though. Just don't eat too much dessert. I'm so jealous of you guys, because I was telling Peter this one, and the MFA students, like I didn't get an MFA, and I want to go back and get one, because I love the idea of spending 2 years to really be in an incubator and with other artists, like pretty close-knit, where you see each other every day or every week, because I don't have that necessarily. I mean, Shayna and I, yeah. But we finish each other's sandwiches all the time. So it's like, we know each other really, really well. It'd be cool to outside influences. I don't know. No, don't you want to be in like a program like this? Oh, she has an MFA already, so. Anyway, yeah, I think we're good, right? Are we, any other questions? Awesome, thanks.